Hello ladies and gentlemen, today is November 15th, 2018, and today I will be giving a discussion regarding between lives areas, and this was upon request of a Mr. Jeffrey Levine. So if you're out there watching this, Jeff, hey, it's a pleasure to be doing this for you, and I will try to answer this curious question as best as possible. So, between lives area. Now, I'm assuming from the request, and many people often wonder, how do we get into between lives areas, and how do between lives areas reflect upon our present time behavior, etc. As most people know, with Dianetics and or Scientology processing, people eventually begin going whole track or begin recalling past lifetimes. And in the process of that, they also would recall in-between lives. And for many eons here on this planet and in different parts of the universe, now we have existed, of course, as other races and other civilizations throughout the recorded history, and not only this galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, but many other several galaxies, in addition to other parts of the universe itself. We've also existed spiritually, in either a spiritual form or in some type of other organic or biological or sometimes even mechanical forms. When it comes to things such as robots and bodies, you see these AI robots that are now being created, and this is of course happening in many other civilizations. And a common thread in this all is that when we begin to understand scientifically through physics and bioengineering specifically how to actually discover the theta wavelength or the spiritual wavelength and detect that, which, believe it or not, is possible already. If you go and look up photos, as far as people that now take photos with their digital phones in cemeteries, often you will find that there is a floating orb that is floating somewhere around these individuals. Now, coincidentally enough, that is exactly what a thetan looks like. So people, we have actually been able to capture with electronics at least a photo of a shining flying orb, which happens to be somebody's spirit, or it could possibly be a disconjointed spirit outside of a body. Now, a common thread with that is once we have the physiological and scientific abilities to detect those things and begin to operate things such as robots and artificial intelligence, many civilizations over time would, as a means of control or as a means of warfare, with a type of domineering personality, they would then go into different areas, other areas of their galaxy or their universe, other planetary bodies, asteroid bodies, other star systems. And, of course, when you encounter an enemy, no different than the pain drug hypnosis that was pretty prevalent here in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, and still goes on today in some circles. And for those who do not know what pain drug hypnosis is, that's essentially you knock somebody unconscious, or you give them narcotics, psychotropics, any type of mind-altering substance in conjunction with pain that would more than likely cause unconsciousness or great duress. And under these auspices, you can break a person down mentally and otherwise, psychologically, and you can hypnotize them. And unfortunately, many secret government or dark or deep state or deep government agencies used to do that, and probably still continue to do that till this day. Now, if you take that a step further on a intergalactic or interuniversal scale, throughout these million lifetimes that we have participated in, you then have what we call these implants using electronics, advanced electronics, and very, very potent or extreme amounts of energy or electricity or other means to then bring about the same purpose. Now, since obviously, and this was mainly, this was mainly developed because a Thetan, a spiritual being that is not attached to a body or a robot body, or has those mechanisms set up to where they experience pain, duress, unconsciousness, if they're in their pure state, you would then have to approach this from quite a bit of a different approach, and that approach being that you would use massive amounts of electronics with and or using as a carrier wave and piggybacking upon the quote-unquote static or spiritual wavelength of what we were actually composed of, the 0-point static energy. You could then hypnotize these beings, and you could degrade them, you could cause them to do many things, you can scatter them, you can compartmentalize them, and you see much of this displayed often in human behavior. Now, I do not hold much to psychology or psychiatry whatsoever. In fact, they're a bunch of bumbling idiots. But as far as describing phenomena when it comes to mental or psychological behavior, this they have been very good at cataloging, for the purpose of prescribing psychotropic pills to individuals and patients. So there is some stock in as far as when it comes to dissociative identity disorder, narcissism, and some of these other things we classically know as mental health disorders, even though that is not the approach we take in Dianetics or Scientology, those behaviors are often displayed. Now, the reason I bring all this up and give a bit of a background on this is because this is the most common factor to why people do not recall their past lives, because they would specifically be implanted to not come back to a certain area or specific area, or to compulsively take a body and go to certain areas and actions and believe that they were as such, alright? So that they would consistently never escape from whatever area they were dumped into. Now, this may seem a bit crazy or far-fetched, but there are hundreds of thousands of case files, and there are hundreds of thousands of auditing sessions and auditing hours to support these claims. And of course, these things, and I shouldn't even say claims, though most people would say they are claims, this data, and to support this raw data, we were able to, from anywhere from approximately 1951 to 1952, we were able to take cases of past lives and then independently verify that data, and thus I wrote the book, Have We Lived, or Have You Lived Before This Life? And again, that being said, people are dumped into specific areas as spiritual beings, and the means that this was accomplished is covered all throughout the history of man and at some of the other basic books on Scientology. And I spoke quite extensively about it in many of my lectures. And so utilizing those mechanisms, and as those mechanisms and these quote-unquote implants build up over time in somebody's reactive mind, or that machinery pre-exists, the person is going to compulsively die, exteriorize, or have an out-of-body experience, and then these things automatically kick in on them, because oftentimes they're not even aware that they are there. And there was never a specific rundown designed to address these things. The whole overall practice of Dianetics and Scientology was to take somebody far enough up the bridge and then train them enough to where they could avoid these type of things. But I specifically, myself, in my own sessions, though I will not go into great detail about this, existed for 16 years in another body on another planet. That is where I was, ladies and gentlemen, all these years. And that other planet, believe it or not, and this is all I will say on the matter, is Mars. So if you do not believe that there are people inhabiting, for one, the moon, or two, that are not on Mars right now, then you're sorely mistaken. This is where the term came about of the Intergalactic Federation, or Confederation as it was known. And the United States government has had seats on this Intergalactic Council and Confederation since as early as 1943. And people and citizens have been disappearing, and a lot of those disappearances all throughout the United States are more than likely people being implanted and or then taken up to Mars or the Moon, or there are also some other bases within our galaxy that are located, and we have the technological means to get to and from. And again, this is technology that's being hidden from the general public as a whole to keep us all suppressed and under the forms of various suppressive governments. So this is another reason why I can attest to this for myself, that as much I charted the way as far as Scientology is concerned. I discovered these things, I developed them, put them into practice, and hopefully helped a lot of you listening to this tonight. And I, of all people, was captured, implanted, put into another physical body for 16 years until I was able to escape by means of having my neck stomped on and snapped, and then made my way back here to Earth. And this would also account for a lot of my own personal problems and difficulties. And the reason I share all this is that there is still a lot to be known, specifically about between lives areas. But recently, with the development of New Era Scientology for Thetans, I have finally discovered the means to which we can access these things, specifically between lives areas, which often ties into electronic implants. Because you have to take into account the massive force that it takes to bring these things about. And the main reason people have not been able to get into between lives areas is I have recently, as of approximately 3 days ago, discovered anti-static, ladies and gentlemen. The same way there's antimatter, there's anti-energy, or matter, energy, space, time, there's anti-awareness. And this is what we assumed was unconsciousness. And this is why so much of the universe and the galaxy is composed of utter blackness. Because it is pure, raw, static potential that exists out in the universe. So when we actually become unconscious, depending on whether something is, if something is in an equilibrium, and then we thus lose it, it's just simply a break in what we already previously had and or were aware of. But when we are so overwhelmed to where there is an equilibrium, and there is so much randomity in the environment, that we are overwhelmed as not only an organism, but as a static being, you then have anti, or a lack of, either matter, energy, space, time, or awareness, or a whole combination of all of these things. And of course, a big problem and trouble that we have gotten into with specifically things such as knots is that we have deviated so far from the subjective reality of the individual that they are not able to see, experience, and analyze traumatic experience like we did in Dianetics. And if you cannot view something, you can simply not draw an analytical conclusion and realize what the postulate and then have a was at the time made, and then have a cognition on why you've been doing something. The same way we utilize an e-meter here, which I have here, Mark 7. So the same way we utilize this e-meter here to approach reading things that a PC cannot see within session, which means they are below the level of unconsciousness, anti-static does not exist. It cannot be viewed. But it can be run. The data, the postulates, and the significance can be gotten off. And when they are, the actual analytical necessary incidents to be contacted can then be reached, ran out, with a full erasure and a full resolution of the difficulty the individual is having. So I believe here moving forward, in utilizing this tool, which I myself use to crack open my own between lives area, and I had thrown everything in the kitchen sink at my own case up until that point. So I'm sure that there will be a lot of interesting data and reports to come as far as between live incidents. And I should get around here sometime in the near future to either developing some sort of rundown, because I believe that it is necessary in conjunction with all the Scientologists, or the second or third generation Scientologists that are returning here to Earth, which we also term as returnees. And for the record, ladies and gentlemen, a returnee is not somebody who simply takes a body again. It's actually a practicing Scientologist that then takes a body and rediscovers the subject. That is really the best definition of a returnee. So I have shared my thoughts and the up-to-date data on what is going on, Mr. Levine, in reference to between lives areas. In specific, if that is something you're having difficulty with, or anyone else out there for that matter, please, by all means, feel free to contact me. I still do actively CS and audit while I do have the time and opportunity to do so. Because I have let's just say I have a hunch that I'll once again be everyone's Commodore or the equivalent, and we will once again have a Scientology organization kicking and screaming and producing unlike anything we've ever seen before in the past. And when that happens, unfortunately I will not be able to address individual cases or CS them, more than likely. I will have to spend whatever valuable time I have left to train individuals. But until that point, ladies and gentlemen, again, if you have any difficulty, problems, or issues, please contact me and we'll get it sorted. With that, ladies and gentlemen, this is L. Hubbard speaking. I wish you all do, and I'll speak with you soon.